Well, first of all, thank you all for participating and coming here and joining us for this webinar. I am Malcolm McNeil, the soon-to-be first Vice President of the Association. And just to start, we welcome all of you to this, our interview today with Professor Benjamin Davis. But before we do that, let me start by pointing you out to our very first PowerPoint to make sure that you know that there is a BHBA membership for everyone. We have 3 levels, and all 3 levels are explained in the slide, from $45.75 a month all the way down to $20 a month, depending upon your ability to join and participate. The one thing that I tell everyone is join and participate. The great thing about the BHBA is that there's plenty of opportunities for networking, speaking, participating, and actually contributing to the benefit of our profession. So thank you all. Also, one of the things that we're doing is we are highlighting the fact that, as all of you should know, we have a very prestigious address in the middle of Beverly Hills, and we're located and situated inside the Rolex building. And that is an excellent place for you to have your office. And if you need an office and a business address in Beverly Hills, a virtual office, especially now, it's become very, very popular with our members. You can check us out, and you'll see that you can go to bhba.org/virtual office and get more information on what it takes to participate and have your office located directly and situated within the Beverly Hills Bar Association. Finally, we have on the screen the Attorney Networking and Referrals Network. What you can do is you can join our network and get more information through www.bhba.org/the network. The network is one of those places where you can meet other industry professionals, and you can look for other people that you may need in order to fill out your office or participate within your practice. So we encourage you to learn the benefits of the network by going and visiting our website. And with that, thank you, Professor Davis, for that'll teach you a little bit about the Beverly Hills Bar.
Excellent.
The only reason we have you here is for you to become a member, you see.
All right. I'll fly down from San Francisco virtually, right?
Good. You have a home. First of all, what I would really like to do is to begin by talking, forgive me about this, but I'm going to talk a little bit about you and introduce you to our audience. Our guest today is Professor Benjamin G. Davis, and I'm going to call him Ben, if it's all right with you, Ben.
Yeah,
may
absolutely.
I do that?
Everybody, yes, please.
Okay, thank you so much. Because Ben is an esteemed and distinguished professor of law at the University of Toledo in Toledo, Ohio. And Ben and I, on a personal note, became acquainted because we are both part of an arbitration listserv where we discuss all kinds of issues that relate to arbitration. Primarily, where do you arbitrate an oil and gas dispute? What are the latest developments in arbitration? What is the appropriate situs? How are the changes in rules, etc.? But Ben introduced an interesting additional topic to this discussion, and that was the issue of diversity in the field of the arbitrators. And that was what particularly caused Ben and I to become friends over the years. And that is a field that sometimes gets overlooked. As many of you know, here in the BHBA, we spend a lot of time talking about diversity. We have our committee, so we also participate in social justice issues as part of our natural fabric of the Beverly Hills Bar Association. But the topic of diversity within the arbitration and arbitrators panels was something that was of unique interest. So Ben and I got to know each other, and from that experience I started to learn not only was Ben a professor at the University of Toledo, but he's a prolific writer. He's written on topics throughout the arbitration field. He has a background himself, having spent 16 years in the ICC, and brings not only knowledge to this topic, but also a passion to the topic. And that passion is something that allowed he and I to exchange ideas. And we didn't agree on every point. But the good news is that we agreed that the topic was necessary to discuss, and the issue of arbitrator diversity was something that we needed to make sure that all arbitrators were thinking about, and that counsel think about it in terms of who they select to arbitrate a dispute. So with that introduction, what I would say to you, Ben, thank you very much for agreeing to join us and to give your perspectives to the Beverly Hills Bar Association. And what I think the burning question, which I don't think I've even asked you, is how did you combine your, let's say, passion for arbitration with your passion for diversity, and how did those coalesce in terms of your working toward these goals?
All right, Malcolm. Well, thank you very much for inviting me. Folks will see I have the standard Zoom Golden Gate Bridge behind me, which I understand looks like there's a fire going on, actually, like a lot of you are experiencing out there. And hope you're all safe, and your houses and families and friends are doing as well as possible in these incredibly trying times that at least we see on TV here. Even in Toledo, we see it on TV. With regards to how I got started in this, my parents were in the U.S. Foreign Service, so I was kind of lived abroad a lot as a kid, and so I'm kind of a international guy. And so I think the key moment probably is in my 1L year. I'd done a first year of business school where you end up becoming a very, aggressive character. And in my 1L year, there was a law firm that was a small law firm that was looking to hire 2Ls to be for a summer job. Half the summer would be in DC, and the other half would be in Africa, in either Cote d'Ivoire or what was then Zaire, now the Congo. And this was, my dad worked a lot in Africa, lived there. This was right up my alley, and so I made the pitch, and they interviewed me even as a 1L, and they were very nice, and they said, "You're great, Ben. Come back next year when you're 2L." And that note came to me on my birthday, which was November 1980, and I was devastated that I'd gotten this ding. Now, all people out there maybe remember being 25 years old and getting a ding on a job offer you wanted. So the weirdest thing is I sat down and wrote him a letter and said, "You need to reconsider," and wrote a long letter about, well, that was the greatest thing since Swiss cheese. No doubt that was the MBA side pushing. Here I was. And the thing was that the law firm wrote me back saying, well, we passed your letter to the entire committee, and they were very impressed by me, and we really like you a lot, and to show that, we now give you an offer for your 2L summer. So now I'm a 1L, but I now have an offer for my 2L summer set up. I don't have anything for the 1L summer. So I called them and said, I'm so happy to get that offer, and I don't know what I'm going to be doing in my 2L summer, so let's do it this summer. And they said yes, and I ended up getting that job for that 1L summer. So I went to the Ivory Coast for half the summer and worked in French civil law. 2L year, there was another law firm that was looking to hire people for a 2L summer in Paris. And so I went to see them, and they said, well, what do you know about French law? I said, well, I was working in so much last summer on lots of, trying to be as Frenchified as I could, hired by them. And so then I went to that firm, which is called S.G. Archibald. And at that firm, there were a number of very distinguished international arbitration practitioners who exposed me to international arbitration. That's when nothing in law school prepared me for it. But that contact with them and him looking over, I remember my first memo, having the senior partner sit down with me, a guy named Chris Sepula, and going word for word through everything I wrote on this particular topic, which is sort of like joinder of claims. And that kind of opened the way. I also fell in love with an American who lived in Paris. And so there we were, trying to find a way to get back to Paris right away, because she became my fiance. We got married a year later. So anyway, I did do job interviews with a couple of American law firms that had Paris offices and got hired. But they wouldn't send me to Paris right away. So I went on my business side and was able to get to Paris with a development consulting firm. Fast 3 years, there's an opening at the International Chamber of Commerce looking for a legal counsel. And it looked like perfect for me. It was purely international work, both business and law at the same time, and in Paris. And so I applied, and they hired me. And at 30, I was literally exactly where I dreamed I'd ever want to be in my life, in terms of doing international work in Paris, business and law together. And I worked there for 13 years, and 10 years as a counsel, 3 years as a director, working in international arbitration. And every year, the passion got stronger and stronger. And
well, let me by the way add for our participants, I didn't mention it at the outset, and it was a bad omission, I think, in light of that story, and that is that Ben, Professor Davis, is a dual graduate at Harvard University of the JD MBA program. So that's when you're referring to your business side. Obviously, you were navigating the JD and the MBA through this whole process.
Yeah,
am I right?
Yeah. It's like, it was basically, and I encourage students to do this kind of program. It was like, where were the opportunities? And the MBA side would get me to Paris right away, while the JD side would have me go to work in New York for a couple years, and we'll see if we'd send you to your office. I didn't know the pitch you're supposed to make, which was more along the lines of, my fiance lives in Paris. And therefore, that would have been much better as an argument. I do want to add one thing, is that that MBA side got me in trouble, I think, because when I went to work at that first job at that 1L summer, they were getting some advice on what it was like in the Ivory Coast, that some of the people gone there before had been there. And they gave me advice, and I kept it to myself as opposed to sharing it with the other intern, okay? And, later on, it's kind of like, well, is the guy a team player or not? Because he told him this stuff, he didn't tell the other person. And anyway, I didn't get an offer from him. So, it was like a lesson about maybe learning to be a team player that happened. And that was a good one, No,
that's an excellent. Well, let me ask you that at that time, were you a pioneer in this field as a person of color at that time? I mean, did you feel like part of the team, or were you feeling a little bit, let's say, out of place, or what was the experience of it like on that level?
So on that level, the irony is that the guy who I was replacing was a Black American who was going to the State Department. And his name's Roberto Powers. He's been in the Foreign Service for, I think he just retired. And so this was really the first time in my life where I was going into a job and I was replacing someone who was a Black American and a Black American man before. So that was one thing. But in the actual working environment there at the ICC, the chairman of the court was a guy named Michel Godet, who was a distinguished Frenchman. He'd been the first legal advisor for the European Community back in '58 and all that stuff. I mean, one of these sort of great spirits, right? And he always made you feel like you were special, that you were somebody great, that you could do great things. Stephen Bond, who just passed away, was the Secretary General, was an American, and he was, again, always making sure you do well, but it was a very supportive environment. And there was expectations that you do the job, right? But, I didn't really feel sort of any particular animosity, maybe because the guy had been there before, so they've been used to having a Black guy there. I don't know, but didn't really feel anything, and just get the work done and do it. In fact, third day on the job, the chairman of the court in a meeting replaced a sole arbitrator in a case. And that never happens, or rarely happens. And one of the parties brought a lawsuit in Zurich against the other party about this replacement. And I get this letter in German in my file saying, please ICC make a statement about what you do. And the chairman, I was kind of give a copy of the whole file to the chairman of the court, and he looked at me, and I'm like 3 days into the job, or maybe 2 weeks, and he says, "Mr. Davis, this is your file. I don't need a file," And then so you have to write that statement. Now, what do I know about international? But and kind of the other folks in the room kind of snicker a little, But it was like still on probation, 6 months probation. So it's like, well, better make it happen, And it all turned out well enough, but that's the kind of environment that generally happen. They're encouraging you to do your best. It's just an expectation of doing your best,
Do you think that the international, I mean, because your resume reflects a tremendous amount of international experience, because when I went through it, I mean, you were a visiting professor in Poland, you've been to the Hungary, etc. Was that, would you say that international experience and exposure was, say, that allowed you to overcome some hurdles that might have existed at that time? I mean, people were looking at your background more from the internationalist standpoint than perhaps a personal characteristic, something like that?
Well, I think for Paris, I spoke French. Okay, so
number one rule, right? Number one rule.
I had a love for France, and I still do, and so I think that was certainly one thing. Each country has its own, I don't know, it's got its own cultural situations. For example, in Paris, the way I used to describe it when I met Americans who came over there, like I'd be in the subway and I'd see an American family looking for the Eiffel Tower, where to get off on this, and I just, hey, you get off here, I just try to be helpful. But the thing was, inevitably the American families would ask me, so, you live here in Paris, but you miss the States, right? That was always, so many times over the 13 or 14 years or 17 years. And so what I would say is that the thing about Paris was that I was not French, so I was not civilized, but I was always a human. I couldn't be civilized because I was not French. That's just, you understand, your second-class status is for everyone in the world who is not French. And
of course,
people who've looked at me and said, well, yeah, of course, kind of jokingly. But so in the States, what would happen, because I worked in the States some, was that sometimes there would be occasions where, I would really kind of wonder if people thought I was human. Okay, that was, because that's a whole history that's there. But in France, I was human, just unfortunately not French, and there are constraints because I was an immigrant, right? So I'm not French. So there's a whole immigrant versus French thing that would operate. And then as the rest of the world going around to these other places, I always had people, or I had a number of people who tried to tell me about biases that this, that, or the other person had. I remember first time I went to Hong Kong, someone would inform me that the Chinese hate black people. I said, gee, 1.6 billion?
Yeah.
And then so I went to India the first time. Somebody said, the Indians, they hate black people. I said, 1.2 billion Indians, you know what I mean? And of course, most, everything was fine. For the most part, you did have some things that happened along the way, but on the whole, it was, I think there's a kind of a group of us who are into the international space, and that was kind of our sort of passion. And certainly the arbitration passion, right? That was the international arbitration passion. We're kind of a shared group of crazies, so to speak.
As we've seen from the listserv sometimes. So, let me ask you a couple of questions, because you and I are also heavily involved in the American Bar Association, and we run our paths cross there also. And as co-chair of the Diversity Committee, you had written and organized a day-long workshop entitled Broadening and Deepening the Participation of Underrepresented Groups in Dispute Resolution. And I found that topic to be fascinating fascinating because I'm past president of a European association, and some of my experiences regarding my Francophone friends are the same as yours, actually. But I will say that that topic, that was what caught my eye in terms of us arranging this program. Tell me and tell our participants a little bit about that program and the origins of it and how you ended up doing it and what you were able to show
Yeah,
everyone.
sure. The co-chair and I of the diversity committee, it's a dispute resolution section, and one of the ideas is the ABA's goal 3 is to increase diversity, and that's as defined as the underrepresented groups are women, minorities, lawyers with disabilities, and LGBTQ lawyers. And so we had some very good things working with regards to women in dispute resolution. We have something called the Women in Dispute Resolution Group that really is quite animated. And we just thought that doing a minority one would be a good thing to do. And we tried to create a MITRE group, which were people of minorities who were interested in dispute resolution. We also had LGBTQ and lawyers with disabilities as part of that list. And that particular meeting was trying to bring together a number of different actors at different levels of international or domestic arbitration or mediation to talk about how to increase diversity there. I mean, I remember one of the speakers was Rusty Park, who used to be the chairman of the London Court of International Arbitration, who's probably one of the most distinguished people in international arbitration. Lo and behold, he let us all know that he was part Native American, that his entire life, he kind of looked at a white guy there, and then he pointed out that he was actually part Native American from his history. And so that was kind of nice because I'm part Native American, and I was like, well, look at this, but there were different people with different proposals. There's the mentoring idea. There was kind of fellowship programs, people coming and getting students involved with the section. There were just a series of different approaches trying to basically get people to have this passion, because dispute resolution is not an area that you really, maybe people are familiar with, and maybe not having seen any mediators in your life as a minority person, or let alone maybe not having had, you may have had lawyers in your family or lawyers you knew of, but like a Johnny Cochran or something, but an actual mediators or arbitrators, you probably had no experience of them. And so, at least back then, that was kind of the idea. Now, there have been some things that have developed since then, like the VIS International Arbitration Moot Court that's held in Vienna and in Hong Kong for law students from around the world. That has been a place where law students have been able to get some exposure right away to arguing an international case. And I think that that's maybe 15, 20 years old now. And that's really been, I think, a place where people have been able to kind of get that bug developing. But,
Interesting.
RD was that, yeah.
No, I was just going to say I participated in the University of Leiden, which does the same thing.
Oh yes,
and
yes.
I've been a moot court judge there, and the arbitration panels have come from around the world. We had African panels, Indian panels, Malaysian panels. So I don't know what they do internally to promote it, but I certainly know that we had diverse panels that were in front of us that were arguing cases. They were very articulate and well read, and I grilled them like hamburgers, and they were able to respond and do very well.
And in fact, I know when I was working at the ICC, I guess there was a guy who did a great job, and the chairman of the court said we had to hire him because he knew what he was doing and was very impressive in his VIS argument, and he ultimately ended up being hired. I think he became the publisher of our the ICC bulletin or something like that. But that's a whole path. The VIS now is a whole path in this space. Plus, unfortunately, with COVID, you don't have that experience. But it used to be 600 people, and the 600 people in a room, they end up being your cohort at growing up around the world. So if you had like a problem in Poland, you would say, well, let me call Jan or Jacek that I met in Vienna, and he would be part of your network too. It's kind of, and you kind of all grow together kind of thing. So
Well,
anyway.
I was going to, but you're now obviously still an active and vibrant professor at Toledo. The question is, are the schools, do they have any particular programs that are, let's say, exposing these opportunities to the students? Because I know I went to Loyola. You and I are the same year. We talked about that earlier. And when I was in law school, we did talk about international law. We talked about arbitration. We talked about things, but we didn't particularly talk about careers as arbitrators or diversity in arbitration or things of that nature. So have the schools caught up to that concept?
I would say some schools. I don't know what, I can't give you a percentage. For example, for arbitration, there's usually a division of domestic arbitration versus international arbitration. Then some schools can get even more elaborate. Inside of international arbitration, they'll have investor state dispute resolution as opposed to commercial arbitration. I mean, some schools kind of have a panoply of international class. I mean, if you're at NYU or you're at Columbia or maybe Emory, that's the kind of thing that you would have a whole series of cases, of classes potentially to build a specialty. At a place like Toledo, I'm basically the arbitration guy. I taught an international domestic arbitration class. I had students who did the VIS, and we basically self-financed to make it happen. Because, it's not sort of a traditional, like classic moot court kind of competition before a judge and all that stuff. But students who did that, they found it a tremendous experience going to Vienna. There's one of them I remember who she ended up being a prosecutor in Philly for 2 or 3 years. Then she went to, I guess it was the University of Leiden, I think it was, to get do a PhD. And then the last I heard of her, she was in Australia teaching, and that's like a whole path that she created for herself, So, I think schools are getting there. The VIS has helped a lot. It's like a turbo for schools to really draft students into an international arbitration space.
Well, focusing on arbitration and the training of young lawyers as arbitrators or as arbitration lawyers even before they become arbitrators, what are some of the things that are going on now to help increase the diversity? I take it from the articles that I've read that you've written that there's still a woeful underrepresentation in the arbitrator realm. Is that correct?
Yeah. I did some statistical work in 2004, 2014, trying to basically surveying everybody I knew, saying, have you seen anybody, And back in 2004, the answer was, yeah, you. I was like, me? Am I that weird a guy, And then, since then, there's been, in 2014, there was more. I think probably the biggest thing was this past summer, Nancy Tevnin, who's the general counsel for the U.S. Council of International Business, and Katie Simpson, who is an arbitrator, actually went out and looked for African-American, or actually not African-American, arbitrators with arbitrators with a U.S. connection. So African origin arbitrators with the U.S. connection, I think it is. And they came up with a list of 127, 130 Black arbitration people at different stages of the career. Some were new, some had been doing this for 30, 35 years. Which was double the total number of Black lawyers in the arbitration groups of the top 37 American international arbitration practices, right?
Wow. Okay.
Right?
That sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it?
Right. It does. And some of them, there were some some people who were on both lists, but one of the things was that the arbitration groups are usually part of the litigation group. There were some, and so actually even among those 57, there were a number who actually weren't doing arbitration at all. They were just doing litigation. So the numbers were really quite low. So to me, at least for African Americans, it was, you know, it's dismal. I'm not so sure that for Asian Americans or Hispanic Americans or Native Americans, whether, at least when I was doing my surveys, I wasn't finding a whole bunch at that point too. Where there's been progress has been with women, and primarily white women. I think the numbers are showing around 25 to 30% numbers of sort of as arbitrators or in these departments. So, you know, it's still kind of got that it's still kind of a color line. Okay, is the way I say it. That it's better than when I was the one, apparently, you know, but it's as good as it ought to be, right? And
Understood.
you know,
I attended a CIR meeting. I think I mentioned it to you also, and it had taken place in Hong Kong a few years back. And I think and that was my reflection when you and I started talking about these issues. And and in looking back, I found not only was there an issue regarding, let's say, diversity within that group of arbitrators who were panelists, et cetera. Yes, there seemed to be a lack of women participating, although we do have some prominent women in arbitration, as we know, like Sally Harpole, et cetera. But the issue was that, yes, I think people of color were missing, except for some Indian lawyers, I recall, who were attending. But I also noted that there seemed to be a good old boy club of the senior arbitrators who seemed to always be busy, whereas the junior arbitrators always seemed to be looking for work. And that seemed to cross color lines. Is that your experience?
Yeah. I mean, there is the sort of grand man, or because it was a man at the time, the grand man of the field. You know, part of it is probably related to people who were involved intimately with the development of the New York Convention in 1958, and so they kind of got a stature from that. But also, one of the things I looked at some of the great arbitrators of my day, I looked at when they were in law school and all that, and many of them had internships at the ICC when they were like 23, 24, so they kind of got bitten by the bug early on, and then they progressed over time to now be those stars that have all of the business, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, the young arbitrator versus the gray-haired types, sometimes call them stale, pale, and male. You know, there's a progress, there's a path, right? That the one path is to be go into a practice, do some arbitration cases. At some point, maybe become a partner, junior partner. You get your first case as an arbitrator, right? Some relatively small case, $50,000 or something. You do a great job. Some institution appoints you maybe as that sole arbitrator. You do a great job. Now you're an ICC arbitrator, and that helps to build your cachet, and you move along. One of the downsides with going into private practice, though, is a lot of firms don't want people to act as arbitrators because you get conflicted out worldwide with regards to, you know, imagine a case like GE and Google or something, and all this business in different parts of the world you could not really compete for, while that person is that arbitrator in that case. And that, you know, so those are some of the dilemmas. Then of course there's the judge route, right? Like we have jams and all that with retired judges who do that. But at least for international arbitration, you know, the route is not clear, but you have to do a lot of marketing for a long time. Got to be speakers at conferences, and you get that first case that an institution takes the risk to, and you do a great job, and then you go get more cases, you know, and then you're kind of on your way. At least that's what I've seen with people.
I know, and I think, well, I had my own office for 20 years, Ben, before I ended up joining a larger firm. And I was finding, and I was very interested in it through this International Lawyers Association because we had an arbitration committee. And I started attending meetings, and that's how I became interested. And in
Yeah,
order for, and the very first arbitration I did, yes, I was starting at a lower level, but it was still rewarding. I did my first arbitration as an arbitrator with the Better Business Bureau.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
so those operate, and I think that's in line with what you're saying. You can find those arbitrations, and then they had other groups like local landlord-tenant dispute
great.
resolution places, not just as a mediator, but actually as an arbitrator, where the parties want somebody to
Yeah,
decide and avoid the court experience. So,
yeah,
do you incorporate that in your discussion with your
yeah,
students?
yeah. Like for example, one of the great international arbitrators is a guy named Judge Howard Holtzman, who passed away, I think. And you know, he was a labor arbitrator for a long time, and then he got named to the Iran-U.S. Claims Tribunal, which was created with, you know, the hostage crisis in '79 and all that, in '80, '81. And so that's how he got into it, and then he built this kind of amazing career as an international arbitrator from then on in. So um, employment, better business, all those kind of things can be ways in for the international side. Again, it's always looking for that little breeze that opens up the way for you to get there. Like if you're in a law firm or something, the way I used to describe it, except with the travel now, it's not possible, is that, you know, there's a partner who says, I need somebody to go to Vladivostok tomorrow. And you have to, who says yes right away. And you don't know how you're going to get there. You don't know where you're going to stay. You may not even have it organized with your spouse, but that's the international level calling to you. You know, that's the international level really calling you. You know, that would be one of the things that I would you know, I would talk about. If I could, I'd like to show you a picture of something to
No,
talk.
please do. I was actually, I was with you. I was reading an interesting question that we have from one
Yeah.
of our, no, go first, and I'm going to get to the question next.
Okay. Does anyone on the panel know how many members on the list are of African descent?
Yeah.
So all
You,
on that list are of African descent with the U.S. connection. Now there can be a debate between the African American as opposed to the Africans from Africa who've immigrated here. So I don't know what to say on that, because both my parents were African American. I was born in Liberia, so I'm an African American and an American African. So I got them both. I'm kind of like, you know, these are like subtle, maybe not so subtle. You know, they're distinctions. You know,
but I think our question actually was, I want you to go to your slides, but I
yeah.
think the question was actually directed to us for introspection. In other
Okay.
words, yes, directed to us through, we have a mediator arbitrator
Yeah.
referral program. So the question is, how many members on our panel are African
Okay.
descent? So I
All right.
think that's so that is
Okay.
something that I'm going to have to follow up on after our
Yeah.
visit. So
All
go
right. So
ahead, please.
let me go over here and hopefully make people enjoy some nice pictures from my past if I can. So let me pop this up as a slideshow. Okay. Oh no, oops, I got to go backwards. All right, I did. So there we go. All right, so this is the one I wanted to show you all, which is a picture of me just recently.
It looks just like you.
Just like me, right? It's like 1998. And the reason I love this picture is that we were honoring this gentleman here. That's the chairman, Michel Godet, who I mentioned he was chairman of the court. He'd actually, I think 10 years before, he had stepped down at the court, and but we were having a day in his honor. And he was one of these great spirits, having helped to create the European community back in the day. And so he's a Frenchman, and in case people didn't notice, he's white, okay? A white Frenchman who was there. Then over here, you have to the left in the bottom left corner, that's Fali Nariman, who is kind of a god of Indian arbitration. He's broader than it.
Okay.
He was the guy who led the way for India to modernize its arbitration law. And 1994, 1995, where they basically took a 50-year leap forward in one step. And then in the middle there's Paul Gélinas, who was also the counsel for the Canadian Embassy. He's a distinguished international arbitrator as well as a lawyer, and was head of the Commission on International Arbitration of the ICC. You know, a lot of experience, construction, arbitration. And then over here on the right is that Justice Ba, who is the Chief Justice of the Common Court of Justice and Arbitration in a series of West African, mainly French-speaking countries that under a treaty called the OHADA Treaty. And this court would actually stand and decide cases above the Supreme Courts of each of the countries with regards to arbitrations that occurred about commercial matters between them. So I love this picture because, in case you didn't notice, everybody's smiling, right? Mm-hmm. All taken by the same passion for this international arbitration, and also to honor Chairman Godet. And this was the guy who would say, you know, Mr. Davis, it's your case. And the thing is, for me, if you look at me, is that I think 38-year-old guy at the time, or no, I was a little younger, maybe 43 or so. Anyway, the point was, all of these people were mentors of me, okay, in terms of, I worked some with Folly Nariman. I remember sitting down with Folly Nariman when they were developing the Indian arbitration law. Paul Gélinas there, and used to sit down with me and talk through cases that were before the court. Justice Ba, I would say I did not know. Paul Gélinas had invited him because of the event. But clearly Chairman Godet was a huge impact on me because of his wisdom and his ability to sort of see the world with an open mind towards all kinds of people from all over the world. I mean, for the Europeans shortly after World War II to think about coming together after all that death and destruction, mm-hmm. He was a commander and all that. Yet he was part of the group in the 50s that built that space. And he taught me things along the way too, and mentored me and encouraged my passion. And so I'm trying to show you this to show that there were these different people who are obviously of different backgrounds, who, whether it's cross-cultural, cross-racial, cross-whatever, mentored me to get me and develop my passion in this space. And this is around 1998. I hope you also note that there are no women in this picture. Mm-hmm. That's like 1997, 1998. And again, I think it was 93, 94, Arbitral Women was started. And, there was a time I know where people wondered for the kind of job I did at the ICC, whether in fact they could, whether women could do that job. And this is kind of things that you can hear. Can this kind of person do this job? The theory that some of the councils sitting around were talking about as well, would they get the respect? Would they get the recognition by parties from this or that part of the world who maybe have gender visions that are this way or that way? Okay. Well, the bottom line was there's a guy named Eric Schwartz in 1994 who named the first woman as a legal counsel at the ICC. And I think we've had secretary generals and deputy secretary generals at the ICC who are women. And guess what? It's all working fine. I think half or 2/3 of the councils are women now, and they're in various offices around the world. So this whole mind game that we played back in, say, 86, 87, 88 was just a mind game in our heads. It wasn't anything related to the sort of reality of what was possible for these people. In addition,
so is it fair to, let me just ask a quick question. Yeah. So is it fair to say that, so it seems that the unity was everyone's, let's say, coalescing or surrounding the campfire of arbitration, right? Is it that right. Seems to be so? Your zeal in terms of arbitration was sort of what propelled you into a nice, smiley moment than necessarily where you came from, what country you could claim to have been representing, or your ethnic background or whatever. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. I think that we all shared that zeal, and on this particular occasion, we're honoring Godet, right? Godet is 10
Hmm.
years after being chairman of the court. He can't, quote unquote, help anybody in their career or anything. He's way beyond all. It's not sort of that career thing, but all these people had genuine affection for him. And, his capacity to generate that kind of affection from this broad group of people was really, I mean, the room was about 150 people, okay? You don't see it there, but his ability to generate that kind of affection was a testament to his qualities. And I want to emphasize that in the mid-70s, actually, he had named a director of the ICC's secretariat named a woman. So way before our conversation about whether a woman could do this, he'd actually already gone ahead and done this. But it kind of gets lost in memory in terms of heading up the secretariat. So if I can say anything from this that I wanted to emphasize to anybody who is out there is that, what if you have these mind thoughts in your head about whether this person or that person can do it, it's just thoughts in your head. I mean, if they have the competence to do whatever the particular topic is, that's obviously the most important part. But that somehow, like some people used to say that a woman wouldn't be given the kind of respect and authority that a man was. I've seen that is completely no longer true. There are people who contain or have those vestiges of misogyny or are misogynists that are out there and all, but it's a problem in their head. It's not a problem in the women's head.
And it's not a problem with the opportunities. I think, going back to the title that you selected for our program, which is hire, promote, or appoint the new list of arbitrators of people of African descent with a U.S. connection, even broader, it's look for the folks that really have a passion for arbitration, are going to be good arbitrators who are going to take the process seriously, are going to understand what it means to the participants. That's the person that you want to be in front of with your clients, just not to embarrass the process, I would think.
Right. Yeah. I mean, for example, we had sort of a coming out party for this list back in, I don't know, July or so, right? And so we had a Zoom with about 50, 60 of the members of the list who showed up. And, 80% of the people on that Zoom were Black women, right? And I learned that about 6 or 7 of them have been doing a lot of work in construction arbitration. Now, that may be counterintuitive to people to think, mainly because construction arbitration to me is like one of those really specialized areas, right? But here they've been doing this, and they just, were off everybody's radar screen as somebody who could potentially be an arbitrator in a construction case that they'd have. And so part of the effort with this new list was to identify all these people and help people at different law firms to, or when they're talking with their clients, to get a little, squib of this person. And if you're interested, go ahead and look them up more particularly. I know one of the things that's happened is the arbitral institutions have been contacting people about getting them on their lists because they were not aware of them, and basically, for me, it's just helping people who are passionate about this subject matter get farther along in their career and kind of demystify whatever trips people have in their heads, and just focus on giving people opportunities. I would say that law firms are always interested, for your client, you want to win. We understand all that. I understand all that. The point I'm just trying to make is whatever the reasons that you're choosing arbitrators for, these people should be part of the pool. That's all I'm saying, that they should be some people who could be considered to be an arbitrator. Then for the actual practice, there are law firms will hire people of diverse backgrounds, and as what happened with me, basically the idea is that in that summer program, or when they start doing that, maybe a little rotation at the beginning of the time that they start working there, that the people who do the arbitration stuff would reach out to those diverse people and say, hey, come on, I want to have you work on this thing. You know, so they get a little bit of that utilization inside of the arbitration space, and maybe they get bitten by the bug in the arbitration space. And, you know, once you get bitten by the bug, you know, you will find a way to do it. But sometimes people may not imagine this person could be in this area. Now, for example, I know one person who had a very successful career. Why? Because she knew how to speak Spanish when everybody else didn't. And they just had a case where everything was, you know, in Mexico and all this, and arbitration in Mexico. And so that's how that person got into that area, and it took off from there. But, you know, you also have, I think, your film, right? You have the American Film Marketing Association arbitrations. I don't know if that's a big part of what folks in Beverly Hills do. I actually used to, believe it or not, have tough duty, which was to organize an entertainment law conference at the Cannes Film Festival. All right.
Wow. How did you survive that experience?
That was terrible. You know, I mean, it was just brutal, you know, because, you know, this is amazing, right? I don't know. There's a big Chinese actress named Gong Li. She was walking down the street. I knew one of her Chinese. I said, she was like the chairman of the jury, or the chair of the jury. So I said, ni hao, like that to her, you know, and she just laughed as she walked past with her black glasses, you know, with her bodyguard, you know. But at the time, you know, all those entertainment lawyers, I didn't see many, again, that's another area, I didn't see many lawyers of color. And, you know, with the way entertainment industry is now, there must be plenty of people who can become lawyers for AFMA arbitrations or something like that, given the, you know, the kind of deals that are being done at this point, or they should be being kind of built into that space. You know, I don't know.
Where would somebody go, Ben? Let's say we have our young barristers, or our young lawyers division of the Beverly Hills Bar, which are the barristers, 36 and under, et cetera.
Yeah.
The question is, what would you tell them if one of them said, yes, golly gee, as a result of what Malcolm and Ben said, I want to explore opportunities to be an arbitrator? Where would you think they should go, or where would you send them to look? Is there any central place where you could find like a list of arbitration tribunals that for entry-level arbitration tribunals, not a JAMS or a AAA or ICDR, but something, let's say, that they would be able to focus on?
Well, for it, you have to distinguish international and domestic arbitration, okay? In domestic arbitration, I don't think there's a centralized place for that, but there are in the communities the use of arbitration. One of the things that in some communities they have is basically court annexed arbitration. Where, as a you know, you got a choice of either having your case wait 5 years to be heard by the judge, or it's shipped out to an arbitrator to decide who'll make an award. That the award may be, if you're upset with the award, it'll go back to the judge. But at least that's one area. You mentioned Better Business Bureau. You know, I like to talk about new areas, looking for new areas. For example, there's domain name dispute resolution that was kind of a big thing back around 2000, that the Internet Corporation for Signed Names and Numbers, they have these little domain name sort of cyber squatting disputes, right? And you kind of look for the new thing that's developing. Another area that I would look at if you wanted a centralized area is I go to the University of Massachusetts' website and look at the online dispute resolution. It says National Center for Technology and Dispute Resolution. That a number of different companies, startups, whatever, particularly in this environment of Zoom, where you're using technology in ways that maybe none of us foresaw in March, but to be involved there. I know the ABA this week is having a Tech Expo that's being done through the dispute resolution section, where a lot of these dispute resolution types working with technology are presenting. And so finding out who those are, getting to know who they are. Another place that I would say is over at, there's called arbitration.com, which some people may know, mediate.com. they actually also own the domain name for arbitration.com, and they've revamped the arbitration.com website. And they are always looking for you can put your picture up and a little story about yourself, of course, but also that there might be something that you read about it and you want to write a little short paper about it, and you can get your name there that way. And the people there, I think it's called the Arbitration Corner. There's a woman named a professor named Amy Schmitz who interviews people about arbitration, and again gets their name out there. There's other podcasts. Tales of the Tribunal is another one. Obviously, the listserv we were on together is another space that we can do to get out there. That's one thing. International Bar Association, getting involved with the committee that does arbitration, I think is an important thing to do early on. American Society of International Law typically has a dispute resolution section. Getting involved with them, and usually what happens is, as you're a young person going along, at some point, one of these little groups decides it wants to write a report on some topic. And then what you try to do is to become the secretary, basically, for that report, or you call it a reporter for that particular project. And you end up meeting all the gods of the area or goddesses of the area. They get comfortable with you. It's kind of this co-opting thing that you start to rise in the stature as this young person who's kind of doing the legwork and all that. But those are the kind of things that you can do if you want to move forward. Obviously, the VIS, acting as an arbitrator in a VIS, is important because people will see you on your panel or otherwise how you act, and that can give an impression of that could be favorable for who knows what. The Polish Chamber of Commerce might be looking for Americans, and all of a sudden you're on their list.
What's interesting is one of our participants has just sent a chat saying the National Bar Association ADR section offers seminars in mediation and arbitration, as well as certifies arbitrators and mediators. So there's another lead, another place.
There. You look around for the paths. I would also mention getting your. One of the things you notice with a lot of arbitrators is they have a lot of letters after their names, right? And that one of them is to be a fellow at the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators. So there's training you have to go through to be in that. So becoming a member in Chartered Institute of Arbitrators, you'll see people with different acronyms behind their names, as almost like everywhere in the world they're on somebody, to show I am really here everywhere. I'm player everywhere there you need to be, to play. But certainly the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators kind of training, I think, without, I own no shares in any of these people. Okay, I'm just saying those are kind of things that you do, and you. Every opportunity you get to speak about some aspect of international arbitration, I encourage people to not only speak, but write a paper. And then that can be published in the various arbitration journals at some point in time, and their name gets out there as a person in that space. And it takes a while, but all of a sudden somebody says, we want you to be a co-arbitrator, or one of the things that happened to me was pretty early on when I came into teaching. I was contacted by a law firm about whether I do an expert opinion on a particular issue in an arbitration. I declined because it didn't help me for my tenure track, but that's the kind of thing that I could have done, and maybe that would have built a certain path that way. More recently, there was a request for there was a dispute at the Supreme Court, GE versus Udukampu, and I accepted doing an amicus brief in that case, which was kind of a kick, to do because it was on a particular aspect of arbitration that I was really concerned about. And so, you take advantage of those opportunities that you see to put your name out there, show yourself as a serious thinker, and all that.
Understood. We're at the end of our hour, and we can keep going on, and I'm going to have to invite you back. We didn't even get to talk about a case that we was recently filed in the D.C. Superior Court. We are going to
Right.
highlight the NRA versus Jams and Wilson
Oh,
and
yeah.
Strawn, and so that case, I think that might need an hour just to talk about that case and its ramifications. So
Absolutely.
what I will do is I will say thank you very much. And of course, to me, you're Ben, but to everybody out there, thank you, Professor Davis, okay, for
Thank you,
being with
everybody.
us today. And
Thank you for.
I would like to get a copy of your amicus brief in GE Otacampo. I know the issue. We
Okay.
actually had to talk to somebody on that. So thank you again for coming. And Toledo in the background looks nice. Looks a lot like San Francisco. And we will be in touch. And I'll see you on our blog, on our listserv if I don't see you sooner.
All right, brother. Thank you all.
Thanks so much.
Stay safe, everybody. All
Thank
right.
you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.